number 10, Karma. Karma is a character who first appeared in Marvel Team-Up issue 100 back in 1980. She came from Vietnam, having fled the country with her family during the war. She was one of the founding members of the New Mutants. Now Karma has powerful psionic abilities that allow her to physically possess others, meaning she can take possession of the minds of humans or animals. This occurs by Karma projecting a psionic energy surge that overwhelms their consciousness and renders her victim unconscious, with Karma's own mind taking the wheel, so to speak. When Karma is in control, she can do some real damage, having the ability to alter her victim's memories, perceptions, reveal information to her, or have them fall asleep. She can even make their body work as if it were an extension of her own. But if she stays too long with a host, she risks her own personality becoming a subordinate to that host personality, becoming more and more like her victim. After an incursion with the Shadow King, Karma also gained the ability to mentally see through others' eyes, and she can protect herself from the psychic assault of others. Moving on to number 9, Joseph. Joseph, who only operates by a first name, is the clone of Magneto, but kind of sucks in comparison to him. This is why he's a bit baffling to some. He is a mutant clone who first appeared in Uncanny X-Men issue 327 from 1995, but he also died in a battle against the real Magneto and had a thing for Rogue really briefly. Now his abilities in theory should be the same as Magneto's if he's the iconic villain's clone, right? Well, that is not the case, hence why he's on this list. Sure, he is capable of generating powerful magnetic fields, but he can also generate electricity and electromagnetic radiation. And the real kicker? Well, he doesn't have the full range of Magneto's powers. He never demonstrated the same extent of those powers or some of the tricks that Magneto has been able to pull off over the years, like producing a wormhole. He lacks the mental barriers Magneto has, and therefore when he manipulates a ton of energy, he often causes damage to himself. Sucks for you, Joseph no last name. Moving on to number 8, HUSK. Many people might assume that HUSK has shapeshifting abilities, but that is not the case. The character who first appeared in ROM Annual Issue 3 in 1984 has the ability to remove one layer of skin, or husk if you will, which then reveals a different layer of skin made out of an entirely different composition. So essentially, she sheds one layer of skin, and the layer of epidermis beneath can be something the likes of metal or stone or something entirely different. She's a metamorph who has made her skin into glass, wood, rubber, diamond, granite, brick, and even adamantium in the past. This can increase her weight, strength, or invulnerability in the process depending on the material. So she becomes diamond, she becomes impervious to an extent. Rubber, she gets bouncy. She even once generated heat and flame and has even produced acidic skin. Now aside from being kinda gross, think of like all that dead skin she sheds, it's easy to see why some would mistake HUSK for a shapeshifter. Although technically speaking she kind of is, but it's a weird process in which she does it, and very limited, can just be her skin. And at number 7, Sage. Sage is a character who debuted back in 1980, appearing in the X-Men issue 132. And she has a variety of mental abilities that can often be a tad confusing. Think of Sage like a supercomputer. Her brain has unlimited storage capacity. She can recall anything at any time with perfect clarity, and the speed of her thoughts allows her to analyze her surroundings for data within seconds, almost instantaneously. She's like a back computer. In addition to that, she can calculate probability of events based on said data. Sage can multitask too, completing various actions all at once in her brain. And if that wasn't wild enough, she has perfect control over her body because of her superpowered mind, meaning she can recreate any physical actions that she's seen once, as long as they are within the parameters that her body is capable of. She can even see a person's genetic code and read their DNA, and selectively evolve existing genetic traits, which can tap into latent abilities, although she can't reverse the procedure, which has caused unpredictable side effects in the past. She is a walking, talking bat computer. Up next at 6, Lockheed. Lockheed is a literal dragon. Well, actually he is an alien dragon who was Kitty Pryde's longtime companion and a member of both the X-Men and Excalibur teams. First appearing in the Uncanny X-Men issue 166 from 1983, this little dude does a lot more than just your typical dragon stuff of flying and projecting fire. And he is also the size of a cat, which is kind of super adorable. Lockheed comes from a race of advanced dragon-like extraterrestrials who can travel through space via astral ships that transport their essence, which kinda seems absolutely absurd. Now because of his empath abilities, he is able to understand human speech despite not being able to speak it all that well, and is immune to telepathic probing. So he's not just a cat-sized dragon after all. Although, I mean, would you rather have a real dragon or a tiny dragon that was cat-sized? Personally, I would go for the cat-sized dragon. much more manageable and like adorable too. And at 5, Revanche. Revanche, who debuted in 1993 in X-Men issue 17, is one of a few characters on this list whose powers are not only confusing, but so is their origin story. So Revanche's early appearances were plagued by continuity errors in Marvel's comics thanks to one of her creators, Fabian Nicieza, failing to read Uncanny X-Men issue 255. In that issue, the character Psylocke is discovered on the shores of an island by the Hand, whereas in issue 22 of the second volume of X-Men, a handful of issues after Revanche's debut, her origin story contradicted the one in Uncanny X-Men, with the character having come to possess Psylocke's body. Confusing, right? Revanche was said to have been an intuitive empath prior to switching bodies with Psylocke, but after switching bodies she gained telepathic abilities and could psionically generate a blade, a Psyblade that she could use to force her way into other telepathic characters' minds. So essentially she is Psylocke but not Psylocke and used to be an empath and is just a big jumble of continuity errors. Yeah, no bueno. Up next, number 4, Zorn. Zorn is a confusing character to begin with. Is he his own dude? Is he Magneto? Does that mean Magneto can do a bunch of other stuff like manipulate gravity and turn his sun head into a black hole? Lots of questions, friends. So, for starters, Zorn is a dude who first showed up in New X-Men Annual 2001 as a Chinese mutant who had a star for a brain. That's why he wears his little helmet. He ended up becoming the subject of an incredibly confusing retcon, in which he was revealed to be Magneto, who had actually died in the Planet X storyline prior. It made little sense. Then it was revealed in Excalibur Volume 3 Issue 1 that Magneto never died at all, which meant Zorn wasn't actually Magneto, and that led to a whole confusing storyline that featured Zorn's brother, who was kinda like his twin, and overall it was just a big mess. Now that could largely be the reason why so many fans find Zorn and his abilities perplexing. But even when Zorn was revealed not to be Magneto after all, his brother shared very similar powers to him, and was technically the second Zorn, and there were a bunch of major differences. Rather than having a sun in his head that his helmet covered, his brother had a black hole there. I mean, similar but very, very different things. The original Zorn also had healing powers, electricity and magnetism generation and manipulation, the ability to teleport via time-space wormholes, gravity manipulation, telepathy, and was self-sustaining. So yeah, that's a whole lot of powers to cram into one dude who may or may not be Magneto, but probably wasn't. Baffling. Moving on to number 3, DAZZLER. DAZZLER is often one of the most ripped on mutant characters in the comics, thanks to her publication origins. Initially, DAZZLER, aka Alison Blair, was commissioned by Casablanca Records in 1978 as an animated special multimedia cross-promotion called The Disco Queen. Casablanca would bail on the project thanks to financial concerns, but the Disco Queen would live on, first appearing in the Uncanny X-Men issue 130 in 1980 as DAZZLER. DAZZLER's abilities, which are yet another source of her history of mockery, include the power to convert sound into light beams of various forms and intensity. She is also a trained singer, actress, and dancer, and of course is a highly accomplished roller skater. No joke on that last one. Arguably, the sound conversion trick of hers is the most confusing. She takes sonic vibrations which reach her body and transduces them into light. She has a large range of frequencies that she can do this with all kinds of sound pressures regardless of complexity, dissonance, or randomness being changed and converted, meaning a song and the sound of a car skidding could both be converted into light. So, what do these light beams do? This is where it gets even a little bit more baffling. She can temporarily blind people by creating a pulse of light of several thousand watts. She can create a cascade of sparkling lights that messes with people's equilibrium. She can create a strobe effect, which is no good for people who have epilepsy, and she can create rays of light that use patterns to produce trance-like effects in her victims. DAZZLER can generate enough ultraviolet light to melt large metal objects. She can even use those light rays to create holograms and has used light energy to generate flight, which I don't quite understand, but that's okay. The more you know. And at number 2, Maggot. Maggot is a character that we've discussed a handful of times on our channel thanks to his absurd abilities. He has a slug-based digestive system. Oh, and he also is psychometric. Now, first appearing in Uncanny X-Men issue 345 from 1997, Maggot is a fellow whose digestive system is quite unique. Where his intestines should be, he has a hollow cavity that's home to a pair of semi-sentient slugs, or maggots, hence the name. He's named those slugs Eenie and Meanie. Eenie and Meanie can burrow themselves out of his torso, and at super fast speeds, they attack a foe or object with a powerful enzyme, which then processes and digests said object, or person. From there, they come back to Maggot, crawl back into his hollow cavity, and then transmit transmit the food energy they collected to him, which then can supercharge him and allow him to do a variety of things like increase his strength, physical size, his sturdiness, stamina, etc. If the slugs don't re-enter his belly, this process does not work. And in the past, he's actually lost one of his slugs too. He doesn't get another one. He's left with one slug, which means I guess half of the abilities of digestive power with one slug. And finally, in at number 1, Darwin. Darwin is a peculiar character. First appearing in 2006, X-Men Deadly Genesis issue 2, he's a mutant who has reactive evolution powers. When he was first born, his mother practically disowned him because of his abilities, and later he was experimented on by scientists until Moira McTaggart recruited him. So what does reactive evolution mean in Darwin's case? Well, his body automatically adapted to his environment or circumstances, which allows him to survive anything, although the extent of that capability has never been fully defined in the comics. Now in the past, he's gained night vision in the dark, he's grown gills when in water, he became fireproof when his skin was exposed to an open flame. But it's not just basic physical transformations with him. He once converted his entire body into pure energy. He has increased his own intelligence. He morphed into a sponge when he was shot at with a weapon meant to destroy one's nervous system. He has learned different languages by merely looking at them. And when facing off against the Hulk, his body teleported him away from the battle. That last bit is interesting because Darwin doesn't have a choice over how his body reacts. While he may have chosen to increase his strength when fighting against the likes of the Hulk, his body sensed the best means of survival was to teleport him away from the battle. His body is even proven to process alcohol faster when drinking, preventing him from getting drunk. It's a tough life for Darwin.
Starting off at number 10, we have Magic, or Ilyana Rasputin, named after a really bad Russian guy. Not really. She first appeared in 1975 in the Giant Size X-Men issue number 1. Now she originated from Lake Baikal, Russia, which on a side note, by the way, is one of the oldest, most clearest lakes in the entire world. It's also one of the deepest lakes. It's the 7th largest lake in the world. Okay, a little bit of a side fact there, I kinda like that sort of stuff. Let's get back to Magic. Now Magic, she was taken to the United States of America by a villain known as Arcade. Eventually though, she was rescued and became a glorious member of the X-Men, but her powers consisted of teleportation, where she brings out these little stepping discs which originate from a dimension known as Limbo. Now she's capable of teleporting not just in small regions but across continents, and she can even teleport through space and time. Crazy, I know, which others cannot do. She also has the ability to form her own armor, which when she uses her magic more from the Limbo universe, it just gets stronger. And that's what makes people wonder, is exactly what this universe is and how does she manage to harness this energy? It's really unknown. However, she's a sorceress of the Limbo universe, and that's all we got. As a matter of fact, she ended up absorbing all of the Limbo universe, which pretty much nowadays when she teleports, weird images of ghosts and dragons and other creatures now appear. I have no idea. It's comic books. Number 9, we've got Michael Pointer, or simply known as Omega. He's actually got a few different names as well, I'll get into that. Now originally he was just a simple postman before he found out that he was a mutant. He's capable of not just absorbing people and mutants for their powers, but he can also take on personalities, that's right. His powers have always been extremely strong that his suit had to be made by Reed Richards so he could regulate his powers. There was also a point in his superhero career where he absorbed the power of 50 mutants and Zorn. Zorn merged with Michael Pointer and ended up killing almost all the members of Alpha Flight. The thing with Michael Pointer is that he does not need to touch mutants to take the power, he could just be right near them. It's kinda silly. And he actually managed to almost take all of the powers from every single mutant on Earth. He's kinda like Superman of absorption, an unstoppable machine with his powers having unknown origins. Yep. I could write for comic books. Number 8, we got Phantom X, which is probably the coolest name of all of these guys, I'm gonna be honest. Now he first appeared in 2002 in the new X-Men series number 128, created out of the Weapon Plus program and acted as a super sentinel for a while. The Weapon Plus program made a group of people or mutants with techno-organic organisms being fused with nanotechnology of a sentinel. I don't really know what that means, but Phantom X was born from his mother, who was one of these Weapon Plus made people, when she was fertilized with nano machines. So his powers, they're interesting because he has a nervous system known as the EVA, which can become external, and when the EVA actually leaves him, he becomes more powerful because he doesn't even feel his injuries. Also, the EVA can shapeshift, it identifies as a woman. Phantom X also even has a backup internal nervous system in case EVA gets damaged. Phantom X also has the ability to go into a state of mind and do his own self-repairs. He's an amazing amazing marksman, and his bullets apparently never miss because they are laced with mutant skin. At one point, he was capable of even skewing reality with illusions. Weird. Number 7, we got Glob Herman. Now the coolest guy, but the lamest name at the same time. First appeared in what was known as the new X-Men Volume 2 138. The prime of Miss Emma Frost May 2013 issue. Now this guy is made up of essentially living wax. It's known as bioparaffin. And his internal organs are pretty much viewable. You can see it, so you can see his bones. They float inside. It's really cool. Now bioparaffin apparently reacts to heat extremely well, and what we do know that this stuff gives him great strength, and at one point he acted as a major heat shield for the X-Men Academy class when they transported to Sword Base. At one point he joined fellow classmates in the Omega game. Glob ended up attacking civilians and joined in the fight against the X-Men. Now the X-Men succeeded in taking him down by burning off that wax layer. He also is known to flick his wax off in small portions, and besides real awesome strength, we don't really know what else it does. Number 6, Shatterstar. I do like the name of this. First appeared in 1991, a part of the New Mutants series. Now, he still remained very popular. As a matter of fact, he was in the second Deadpool movie. He originated from a planet called Mojo World, which was also a century in the future and in another dimension, and I'll get to that and his powers in a short bit. Basically, he's a genetically engineered individual, and he learned to fight in the arenas on Mojo World. Now, for his powers, he has superhero strength, he can time travel, and also dimension travel. Pretty awesome. He also has extreme senses, keeping him alert, and his weapon, which is a staff, is extremely strong. At one point, he was capable of hitting the Thing into a building, which is like, what? I don't know how you do that. Because he was also engineered, his bones are hollow, so he can go really fast. As a matter of fact, he's expected to be able to dodge machine gun fire at point blank range. He's also extremely intelligent and can learn things like languages very quickly. Number 5, we got Gold Balls. Probably the worst name for a hero, but I mean, let's be perfectly honest, it's self-explanatory. He pretty much takes these gold balls that he can just produce and projects them from any part of his body. On top of that, he can call in an infinite amount of them, and like he can not only shoot them in a straight line, but he can also direct them. Pretty weird kind of ability. I mean, magic balls that can also grow in size. Wouldn't the ladies love that? Yeah. Number 4, we got Blink. Now, a member of Generation X, also in the film Days of Future Past, which is my favorite X-Men film, if you guys really wanted to know that. Now, she's extremely unstable. Sounds like a lot of mutants these days, but oh well. Now, she has the ability to not just teleport herself, but other people around her, which sometimes seems all too convenient. Now, this ability makes her being able to also teleport objects and other things that she can use against her enemies. As for how she does this, we don't really know. Number 3, Forge, a man of great technology, and not just good at inventing things, but he can also perceive mechanical energy in action, which basically means he can look at something and go, ah, that's how you use it. Pretty much, he's a guy that just went to Harvard University for engineering and walked out and said, yep, I'm smart. Actually, to be perfectly honest, it's not realistically through intelligence, more or less like technological instinct. Sometimes he'll make something or figure something out and he doesn't really know why, and then he has to go back and he's like, oh, that's how I did it. On top of that, he's also a user of magic. He uses Native American magic, but simple, he's just like an Iron Man, just different. Number 2, you've got Dazzler. Now, she is one of the weirdest. I mean, I don't understand any of her powers. I don't know if she's still being made, but either way, apparently she can transduce sonic vibrations. She uses a range of frequencies, she uses the audible spectrum, and uses sound pressure levels. What does that mean? Well, apparently she uses sound and music because music is very pleasing to her. Yeah, that's right. She uses this energy to create light waves that can either put like a trance effect on her enemies. She can also blind her enemies. She is incapable of being blinded, and she also can create holograms and convert this energy to fly. How she does this, nobody really knows. Basically, it's a lot of BS, but it was probably designed by a music student. Number 1, we've got Rogue. I know a lot of you guys are gonna go, come on, really? But realistically, for me, I don't really understand Rogue. I mean, you guys already know a lot about Rogue, so I'm not going to get into the details of her, but we really don't understand her, powers to a degree. And one one of the biggest problems is that she's had a different amount of abilities through time, and that's what gets really conflicting. Now, we all know her that she has the ability to absorb other people's powers and other mutants' powers, so basically that means no kissy kissy for her. Thank you. However, in some cases, she can also not just absorb their powers, but their memories, their personalities. Apparently, she can duplicate herself into her victims. So I'm like, yeah, I feel like she's just the vampire of mutants, you know? At one point, she got so powerful she could do an instant death touch. After the Messiah complex, she had the ability to control her powers, so yeah, she could get it on and not kill somebody. It's great. She also apparently, you know, absorbed Miss Marvel's powers at one point and even Wonder Man's powers, which she had a problem doing that in the past. But one thing is, when she absorbs the powers, her victims are sometimes unconscious for a while, and yeah, how she gets her powers, we don't really know.
Number 10, Deadly Genesis. We can talk about different X-Men and mutant teams here, but I'd also like to touch on some of the rosters as well that you may have forgotten about. This one might be due to selective memory loss, or it could just be because you haven't read the story yet. We are talking here about the X-Men Deadly Genesis limited series, which revealed the next team sent into Krakoa after the X-Men team we know went missing. This team wasn't necessarily a bad one at all. In fact, all of these mutants are kind of super powerful, but they were all basically introduced in this short series, which didn't really help to make us care as much about them as we could have. All in all, this story just had a very early 2000s feel to it. Not that that's a bad thing. The Deadly Genesis X-Men team were a group of kids that Moira McTaggart was trying to help out. She didn't even really see them as students, and then Charles recruited them and turned them into X-Men. The team consisted of Sway, Petra, Vulcan, and Darwin, who have all recently reappeared in the Dawn of X line, in case you were wondering where they made their first appearance. Number 9, Xavier's Security Enforcers. One that we might forget about every now and then is the mutant team that Bishop originally belonged to from the alternate dystopian future that he hails from. I believe this Earth is 1191, but I could be mistaken on that. Didn't even write down my Earth number. Bothers me. This mutant team is known as the XSE, which stands for Xavier's Security Enforcers. If you know Bishop well and you're a big fan, you likely know this team well, but for those who are new to the character, you might not know about this group of enforcers. The point of the team that Bishop was part of was to preserve the long-dead Professor Charles Xavier's dream, where mutants and humans could exist in harmony, living peacefully together. Bishop has even been known to wield specific future equipment, which he got from XSE, although we haven't seen them in a while. All members of the team wear their mutant tattoo brands like a badge of honor, and the members have included Randall, Malcolm, and Bishop's sister Shard, among others over the years. Before we hop into our number 8 spot, I just want to thank all of you for being here and give you a quick reminder to click that like if you are enjoying this video. It really does help us out. Number 8, Nasty Boys. You might remember the original villainous Marauders team, but do you remember Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys? Don't worry if you have, because I will never let you forget. Well, both the Marauders and Nasty Boys teams are villainous teams. I couldn't have an obscure mutant team list and not seize the opportunity to remind you all of the Nasty Boys, so here we are. I also just love this name for the team. I personally always read Mr. Sinister with like the most outlandish, flamboyant, yet manipulative pseudo-English accent, so for me it's very fitting that he decided to name his team this. Nasty Boys, so perfect. It fits perfectly with the voice that I have for him in my mind. The Nasty Boys were the team that came after the Marauders. Instead of Gambit being involved in the team, Multiple Man was the generally heroic mutant who got involved. Originally, the team saw Ruckus as leader, with Slab, Gorgeous George, Ramrod, and Hairbag making up the roster. Gorgeous George even resurfaced in Dawn of X more recently. Yay! I might be the only one, but I'm still kinda hoping that the Nasty Boys as well will make a return. Bring them back. Bring them back. Number 7, Outback. When it comes to X-Men rosters as teams, one of the best but shortest running roster is the Outback team. This era for the X-Men team lasted less than 25 issues, but was still so good that people still talk about it today. Now, if you missed this one and you've never heard of it, it's one that you actually probably should read. Not one of my silly points, more one of my serious and beloved forgotten teams on this list. The team started off in issue 229 of Uncanny X-Men, with Storm, Wolverine, Rogue, Colossus, DAZZLER, DAZZLER, Longshot, Havoc, and Psylocke on it. We'd also see Jubilee introduced during this roster's time together. The OUTBACK team is noted as being one of the best rosters for the X-Men when it comes to having a group who truly feel like outsiders. Also, you get to enjoy the Inferno story in this run, which is bizarre and magical, so you're welcome for that. Number 6. X-Corps. No, I'm not talking about the X Corporation, which has yet to come out but is still coming our way. Thank goodness. I thought that book was going to be firmly cancelled, but fortunately it has been revived. I'm so ready for X Corporation, let's go. When we talk about X-Corps, we are talking about Banshee's team. He formed this team after Generation X disbanded, and most of the team were composed of that era of mutants. This team was made up of former villains turned heroes and was created to act as a police force basically for the mutant community. Joining Banshee were the Blob, Avalanche, Fever Pitch, Jubilee, Husk, and M, aka Monet. The X-Men team actually did not approve of this team's creation and actually attempted to get Banshee to disband it. In the end, Mystique infiltrated the team and liberated its members, especially the villains, who were being manipulated into behaving heroically by Mastermind under Banshee's orders. Number 5. Extreme X-Men. This X-Men roster marked the return of Chris Claremont to the X-Men in a full-time capacity. Extreme X-Men Volume 1 is a series that started in 2001 and ran till 2004. It was a team that featured my girl Rogue as the leader, woohoo, which you know I'm all about. The original Extreme X-Men roster also featured Beast, Psylocke, Bishop, Storm, Sage, and Thunderbird on the team. Lifeguard, Gambit, and Slipstream were also added to the mix throughout. This team was originally brought together to find Destiny's premonition-filled diaries, but of course along the way was distracted by many other imminent threats. As you do when you're on an X team. Number 4. Generation Hope. This one is from the 2010 series Generation Hope and was under Cyclops' banner ultimately following the events of Regenesis. Though the team itself was led by mutant messiah Hope Summers, and its roster consisted of No Girl, Pixie, Primal, Sebastian Shaw, Transonic, Velocidad, and Zero at that time. Though originally Hope's team started pre-Regenesis as just being 5 mutants including Hope herself, with Velocidad, Oya, Primal, and Transonic on the team. The team was a search and rescue group who were brought together as they were acknowledged as being 4 of the 5 lights on Cerebra. Hope basically triggered the rebirth of the mutant gene, activating these mutants. The 5th light was what they sought and kind of why they came together, heading to Tokyo, Japan. Zero was the mutant they sought, who would eventually join the team, although originally would be antagonist. Number 3. X-People. You probably forgot about this team just because their name is, well, super forgettable, but they are actually from a very memorable alternate universe, the MC2, or also known as Alternate Earth 982. This Earth is the home of the beloved Mayday Parker, aka Spider-Girl, now known as Spider-Woman. But you know what's not so memorable from that universe? Their version of the X-Men. I mean, I get that X-People is meant to be gender neutral, more inclusive, but is that really the best name they could come up with? There has to be something that isn't X-Men that is better than that. I mean, I know there is because we have dozens of other X teams with the letter X in them that are way more catchy than X-People. Because of the Earth it is set in, X-People is a team of originally younger mutants who are now older and taking on the role of leaders, mentors, and teachers. Actually, here Jubilee is the team leader, with her core team roster including Simeon, Angry Eagle, Torque, and Spanner. Number 2. Factor 3. Factor 3? That sounds like some kind of toothpaste. This is another villainous team composed of mutants but led by an alien known as Mutant Master. You might not remember it because it was only around for a few issues and also first appeared way early on in X-Men issue 28 back in 1967. This team popped up a few times and would often force mutants into doing their bidding, often mind-controlling Banshee to attempt to kidnap or help kidnap Professor X. What a wacky time it was. Fortunately, in issue 39, Factor 3 was defeated for good and hasn't bothered the X-Men since. So we haven't seen them for a really long time. Number 1. Lightning Force. This X-Men team comes to us admittedly from an alternate reality, which might be why you've never heard of it before. But once you learn about them, you'll likely wish they had remained forgotten. Lightning Force is an X-Men team that we come across in the Exiles, who themselves belong to Earth 597. They are basically the alternate Excalibur team from their reality, a reality where the Axis won World War II. I think you know where we're going with this. Their roster is almost as surprising as the whole idea for this team. We have Herr Xavier, who helped to create the team through experimenting on them. yikes. And leading the team, we have Hauptmann England, aka Captain Britain, with Magon, aka Gloriana, Shadowcat, and Nightcrawler. Also, if you were wondering, yes, Kitty Pryde is still Jewish in this reality, which makes her character's history here pretty dark. Number 10. All-female X-Men. Oddly enough, this book didn't do as hot as expected, despite the fact that it was an awesome powerhouse team composed of all ladies. This team was first introduced in 2013's X-Men series in issue number 1, as one of the main X-Men teams, and the series was part of the Marvel Now event. The team featured Kitty Pryde, Rogue, Rachel Summers, Jubilee, and Psylocke, with Storm as the leader. This team was the first in the history of the X-Men to be an all-female team with its own book. So while it was not a commercial success, it's still an important part of X-Men history to be noted for sure. Number 9. Chuck Austen's Uncanny X-Men. At least, I kind of hope you've never heard of this one, because if you have, you probably just forgot about it after years of trying, and now I'm traumatizing you by bringing it back up. This is the team that featured Stacy X. Yeah. I like Stacy X, but I can also see why her character and this run were super problematic. Austen's run on Uncanny X-Men began in issue 410 and ran till issue 443. The problem here wasn't so much to do with the members of the team as the subject matter. Many people feel that Austen's run was hypersexual, and he also gave us the revelation that Nightcrawler's dad was Azazel, which honestly isn't that terrible, but then he also gave us the weird Draco storyline with the X-Men versus the Neopham, which was something. It was a time. All in, this was definitely a controversial run, especially considering the relationship between Husk and Angel. The team was made up of Archangel, Beast, Iceman, Nightcrawler, Stacy X, Wolverine, and Professor X himself to start, but it would later on feature Husk, Polaris, Northstar, Juggernaut, and Havoc. Before we move on to this next spot, just a quick little reminder to click that like button if you haven't already, it really does help us out. Number 8. Children of the Atom. You might not have heard of this one because it isn't even out yet, but this is one of the new teams and books that we had expected to see earlier this year, but due to the global pandemic was delayed and is now delayed again. Originally it was moved to January of 2021, but now we aren't expected to see it till April of 2021. Boy, that is a long wait. But just because they aren't around yet doesn't mean we can't talk about them. And if you haven't heard of this team yet, you might want to keep your eye out for when their book is released. Children of the Atom is a team of new teen mutants who are basically X-Men superfans and are trained by these very famous original mutants. Technically, the X-Men team was never meant to exist in Krakoa, as was just revealed recently in the comics, despite them having their own book as part of the Dawn of X line. I know, it's a little confusing. So it'll be interesting to see how the Children of the Atom, who are being advertised as kind of X-Men sidekicks, fit in exactly. In a world where, there's not really supposed to be X-Men? Well, we have yet to meet the members of this team. We do know some of them not only have similar costumes to the classic X-Men, but also have similar powers. Number 7. Hellions. No, not that Hellions. This Hellions. In fact, Empath's look in the new Hellions was a throwback to the original Hellions team outfits. Empath was also an original member of the team. Before we saw the team revived in Dawn of X, they were Emma Frost's team. Basically her version of a teenage mutant team similar to, well, the New Mutants. We're also a teenage mutant team. Every time I say teenage mutant team, I just want to say Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, but that's not what we're talking about. Although they are also a teenage mutant team. In comparison to the new Hellions, these Hellions were not as crazy, but were somewhat troublemakers, who had an ongoing, sometimes friendly rivalry with the New Mutants themselves. The team consisted of Empath, Beef, Bevatron, Cat's Eye, Roulette, Taro, Thunderbird, Jetstream, and Firestart. The team was first introduced in New Mutants issue number 16 in the 1980s and was disbanded in 2009 in the comics after most of them were basically slaughtered, victims of a surprise attack. The team has returned since, but the new Hellions team only shares one member of the original roster, Empath. Number 6. X Corporation. Many people may have forgotten the existence of X Corporation since the organization was destroyed and became defunct back in the early 2000s, but they are coming back so it's a pretty good time to remind everyone of their existence. Reminder, X-Corp is still a thing. This actually just happened in the comics during the Empire event when we saw for certain that Xavier had revived the X-Corp and that Monet and Angel seem to be running this branch of mutant affairs. X-Corp in the past has been a non-for-profit organization working to help mutants in their fight for rights in less bold ways than what the X-Men are usually up to. It also provided a place of refuge for mutants who needed it, until the global organization had their various branches targeted and blown up around the globe following the events of M-Day. X-Corp will be getting their own book in the Dawn of X line, which I am way too excited about. I just want to see Angel get a moment in the spotlight, you know? Many believe the book to have been cancelled, but Jonathan Hickman actually confirmed early in December that it is still very much a go. Number 5. X-Men The End. In this series, we saw a bunch of teams kind of come together, ending in one big one, and Chris Claremont's The End. I like this X-Men team as well because although she died pretty early on in terms of her appearance here, we also get a shout out at least to Dust. And Dust is such an underrated X-Men in my opinion. This comic also introduces us to the future daughter of Bishop and Deathbird, Aaliyah Bishop. The final X-Men team features Kitty Pryde, Wolfsbane, Karma, Northstar, Dust, Martha Johansson aka No Girl, the Cuckoos, Cyclops, and a subgroup known as the Heavy Hitters, which features Wither, Frenzy, Polaris, Juggernaut, and Kid Colossus. Number 4. The Upstarts. Speaking of young mutant teams that are lesser known like the Hellions, we also have their straight up not friendly at all rivals, the Upstarts. The Upstarts were definitely a more villainous crew in comparison to the Hellions, just in general, as their whole goal was to basically kill mutants. The Upstarts were a mutant team created by Selene, the Black Queen of the Hellfire Club. She put the team together in order to test the members, getting them to compete for points which would be awarded whenever they killed mutants, based on the mutants' power set. Originally, the young group of mutants involved were unnamed and were promised that whoever got the most points would win a prize, which remained a mystery pretty much through all of the comics that they were featured in. I bet it's cake, and I bet it's a lie. Although I think it was also mentioned at one point somewhere that it was immortality, so in case you were wondering, for realsies. Number 3. Battle of the Atom Future X-Men. While everyone might focus on the Battle of the Atom Future Brotherhood team, as Race has a tendency to steal the show, plus my girl Zorn Jean, and also featuring Molly Hayes, people tend to forget about the awesomeness that was the Future X-Men team. The real X-Men team. This team featured a much more skilled Iceman, who now was known as Ice Wizard, Wiccan, who had become Sorcerer Supreme, Chimera, who is believed to be Storm's daughter that she had with Black Panther, Shogo, Jubilee's son, known as Sentinel X, Colossus armed with Magic Soul Sword, Kid Omega as Phoenix, and Jubilee as Wolverine. Number 2. X-TREME Sanctions Executive. The other XSE. This team also spiraled out of the team that we talked about previously on part 1 of this list, Extreme X-Men. XSE here stands for the Extreme Sanctions Executive. Similar to the original XSE that Bishop was a part of in the future, this team is also like a military police force meant to maintain and in some cases enforce peace is kept between mutants and humans. Storm was asked to create the team by the United Nations and eventually would increase its numbers by recruiting the rest of her X-Men, making this team another government-sanctioned mutant team, like X-Factor was, and still one of the first of those types of teams. Team members have included Bishop, Cannonball, Magma, Rachel Summers is on every team, I love it, Psylocke, Rogue, Sage, Wolverine, X-23, and Gambit. Number 1. X-Animals. If you're an intense X-Men fan, you may be familiar with Mojo's X-Babies, but are you familiar with his other attempts at recreating or recasting Marvel's 616 X-Men after they were believed dead? One such team that attempted to step in was the X-Animals. This was a team of, well, animals, who each took on the role of a different mutant member of the X-Men. We've got a skunk standing in for Rogue, a bulldog for Wolverine, a pig for Dazzler, a rabbit as Havoc, a cat for our Storm, which I kinda love, a bird, possibly a hawk as Longshot, an otter as Psylocke, and a gorilla as Colossus. Sadly, this team was not acceptable as a replacement in Mojo's opinion, and he got rid of them. But I'd love to see them return at some point, if that's possible.